the invalid ballots. In other words, if somebody has compared between two parties, you're not sure which party, you sort it out and remove it. If somebody has not clearly marked his or her choice in the paper, you remove it. You sort it out and then you line up, and each party, you count the votes for each party.
And all this must be done with the consent of the party agents.
Not the consent, and the full observance of the party agents. They're there. You don't need their consent to count votes.
No, not to count, but in terms of somebody thumb printing two places, I think, do you show to the party agents for all of them?
You show everybody present, and then if the presiding officer is rejecting, it tells you why he's rejecting, because the choice of the voter is not clear, or he has voted more than once or for more than one party. So in which case you separate that, and he shows it to them, but he doesn't need their consent. He just explains to them where there's any dispute, they reason it out, and then he separates that, and then he enters the results into a form stating how many votes each party has scored, and then he declares the result and pastes the copy of that result in the polling unit, and then gives a copy to each of the party agents present and to the policeman policewoman who's present, and then it is taken for collation. Now, in each polling unit, they have a cluster of units into a ward level, election area level, in which case you now enter those results, the aggregate of those results from all the polling units in that particular area into this result form. The collated first level of collation, the EC8B result collation form for the RA, for the ward. And from there, when that is done, is now taken onto the local government collation center. And there are 203 wards in Ondo, but only 18 local governments. So in each of those 18 local governments, the results for each of those local governments will be collated in a specific area. And the same process is done. You aggregate the votes cast by each candidate, and then you write it out as well before it goes on to state collation. Now, there's a misconception, especially it happened in Edo, and we hope that we'll clear the air here that suspension was there was a suspension of collection of results. It wasn't so. A lot of the time, the news media, including the NTA, are at the state collation level. In Edo, we decided to wait for an aggregate. Several of those local governments to be there, most of the local governments before we commenced the process. Now, after local government collation, they go to the state collation center. But late into the night, collation was still going on, because you cannot complete the exercise until you've gotten all the unit results for the ward and all the ward results for the local government, and then the local government will now collate at the central level, the state collation center. That is where the returning officer will now make a declaration as to who the winner is, if a clear-cut winner emerges at the end of the day, who has satisfied all the legal requirements. In the governorship election, like the presidential election, it is not sufficient that you score the highest number of valid votes cast. You must also score at least 25% in each of two-thirds of the local government area. So each Ondo is unique in one way, in the sense that it has 6 local governments per senatorial zone. You have 3 senatorial zones, and they are equally divided.
Spread.
Yes, well spread, and and so you must score at least 25%. Apart from scoring the majority of lawful votes cast, you must also score 25% of the votes in two-thirds in 12 local governments. If no person does that, or if the person who scores the majority of votes cast does not get that spread, then they will have to go for what we call a runoff election between the two leading candidates within 7 days of the declaration of results. So a result will be declared, but no return will be made until we go for a runoff. That's the process.
You've had, Mr. Usman, you have had this very beautiful process.
Very well.
Is there any part of this process where the police is absorbed? Your duties had started in the morning. In fact, before the morning, like I said, escorting the ballot papers, the materials, and of course, it has started with you keeping the peace. But when people begin to go home and you are left, what is left for the police to do?
Well, we still maintain ground. Our duty and responsibilities starts with the INEC, and does not even end when INEC ends their own. So, in other words, we have to observe post-election mood and see if the atmosphere is calm for us to stand down. So our duty is not even when INEC ends its own.
Mr. Ojo, as an analyst, you have observed this thing. You're not just an analyst, you also have observed, physically sometimes. Is there any of these processes that you think can be frog leaped.
Frog leaped.
Yes.
No, leapfrog or frog leaped or whichever. You can't jump you can't skip any of the processes. You know, election is a very methodical exercise, and any attempt to skip any of the processes can be very counterproductive. In fact, you know, even as little as omission of name of a party on a ballot can lead to the nullification of the result of that election. So INEC has to take it slow and steady, has to be very meticulous, because we have even gotten to the very most critical stage, which is collation. And from observation report, it is the weakest link, so to speak, because the level of vigilance at that level is reduced. It's left to the party agents and maybe few election observers who may deploy to polling units. And as at that level, human error sometimes, because of fatigue, you know, this is an exercise. Remember, many of these people slept at rack. They didn't sleep in their homes. And having worked all day, and it's a chain, it's handover of batting from one level to the other. As we speak now, as many polling units are rounding off with sorting, counting, and announcement of results, they are proceeding to Ward Collation Center. Their job will not be done until that Ward Collation, they are done at the Ward Collation Center. That's when they could be discharged and say, okay, you can go. Then the chain will move from the Ward Collation Center to Local Government Collation Center, from Local Government Collation Center to State Collation Center. And so any of these processes cannot be skipped, because even the final level, after the announcement, if any of the 28 candidates have met the basic requirement, there must be a return, which is declaration of a winner. If that is not done, that single line of saying, having satisfied all the conditions, is hereby
requirement of the law.
Is a requirement of law. If that pronouncement is not made, the election is inchoate, and no winner. Because you know that is what we have in 1993 during the June 12 election. Many people knew what the results were, but because it was truncated, the announcement was truncated. Even though the announcement was truncated, don't forget, everybody that was party agents already knew what the results were with them. But the fact that that process was not consummated at the final collation point and a return made, it was later, how many decades after, we are now reading in Professor Finwosu's book what the results look like. But it was, that's why we don't have a president-elect in MKO Abiola. So it tells us that every procedures need to be observed so that the election can stand on 4 grounds.
While we're doing that, we're waiting for all those processes to be strictly observed and followed. And back again to our